Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. You are here for Intro to Apple Computer Files and Folders. This is a continuation of last week's class on Intro to Apple Computers. We are currently working on a way to distribute that video for anybody who attended last week. But we do have a previous version of that on our YouTube channel that you could watch as well. But today we're going to cover files and folders and a little bit about organization and the Finder and all the cool things that you can do with your files and folders. So I'll go ahead and get started by saying my name is Susan Winkler. I am our technology librarian here at the Champaign Public Library. And today we have Rebecca, who's going to be our instructor. She is a self-proclaimed all things Mac person, as she'll tell you in a few moments. We also will take care of a couple of housekeeping details. So for those of you who are joining us today, if you would like and you have not been in Zoom before, I'm going to just quickly go over a couple of Zoom features that we'll utilize today. In the bottom of your screen, you might notice that I've enabled live transcriptions. So you should see what we're saying showing up across the bottom of the screen. If you don't want that, there's a little CC box where you can control either to hide or disable that or to enable it for yourself. Okay. In the middle, you should see a little chat bubble and then also a raise hand. So we'd like you to utilize the chat bubble and the raised hand for questions. If you can type your question out into the chat using that chat bubble, and you can send it either to everyone or just to the host and panelists, which would be myself and Rebecca. And then I will go ahead and pose those questions out loud to Rebecca. You can do that anytime throughout the webinar. Don't feel like you're interrupting us. We do have slides specifically for questions, but you don't have to wait until those. You can ask it at any time. Because if you have the question, it's likely someone else has the question. And just like we run our in-person workshops, we like everyone to feel like they can ask whatever they need to when they need to. If you don't want to type out your question, you can also use that raised hand feature. And I will notice your raised hand, and then I will ask if you want to be unmuted so that you can ask your question verbally to Rebecca over the Zoom not muted feature, I guess is what I would call it. You can ask your question verbally. We also will send out a recording of today's webinar for y'all through email a little bit later. We also have a handout for today's workshop. I have posted the link to the handout in the chat. I will do it a couple of times today, just in case there's folks that have come in since it was first posted in there. And you're welcome to also request the handout from us. We can print it out for you. You can pick it up curbside. That way you don't have to print it yourself if you don't want to. Am I missing anything?
I think you covered everything.
I think we've done it enough now that I think I've got it all ticked off and check marked off in my brain rather than having to write it down. The last thing I'm going to do though is actually introduce Rebecca, who is our instructor for today. How are you doing today, Rebecca?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
All right. I'm actually doing really well. I'm really excited to learn more about Apple files and folders, especially because I don't have as much experience with Macs as you do. So I am ready to learn.
Well, that sounds really good because I'm ready to teach.
All right. Excellent. I will go ahead and stop my video and let you take over.
Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And then you guys will be able to see my handout, which I'm going to jump into. So just give me 1 second while I get that pulled up. All right. All right, so I hope you're seeing my PowerPoint presentation there.
Yes, I am.
Okay, cool. All right, so welcome everybody to today's webinar. We're talking about Apple computers, of course, and we're diving deeper into some of the stuff concerning files and folders on the computer. So if you have a PC, a Windows PC, and you're attending today, that's okay. A lot of people will attend these Apple computer classes just to get a feel for the Apple computer environment. And I should say that it is going to be different. So if you have a Windows PC, a lot of the stuff that you're seeing today will not apply to your experience on a Windows computer. But it's always good if you're interested in getting an Apple computer to kind of feel it out and see if it maybe would be something you're interested in. So that's kind of why we hold these webinars, to let you guys experience what's out there and of course to get to know your own devices. So let's go ahead and jump in. Of course, as Susan was saying, we hope to have the recording from last week's webinar available soon. And of course, once that's ready, we'll send that out via email. And of course, in the meantime, you can always reach out and ask us any questions you may have about Apple computer questions. All right, let's go ahead and dive right in here. We're going to talk about what we're covering today. So first things first is we're going to talk about the Finder. That's the main thing we're focusing on today. The Finder is going to be your sort of gateway into all of the files and folders on your computer. We're going to talk about how to navigate that, how to search, how to create a folder. We're going to talk about selecting items and moving items. Maybe you want to move them around on your computer. We'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about how to see some information about some files, such as the properties. There's a couple of options that you have when you get into some of the more advanced stuff with files and folders. We're also going to talk about preferences when it comes to the Finder. So that means stuff that you can customize about your experience while you're using the Finder. We'll also talk about how to delete things off of your computer. We'll also get into getting help. So there is a way that you can get help on your computer when it concerns the Finder, as well as just other things that are on your computer too. We talked about that a little bit last week. We'll also talk about some best practices for things like naming and organizing your files. I have a glossary as well, so we're going to talk about a lot of terms today, and then I created that glossary just to kind of collect those all in one space that was easy to see. And then we're also going to talk about some additional resources, just some links that you guys can visit after class or on your own time. All right. Before we get started, I'd be happy to take any questions that you have right off of the bat, or if there are any questions that you have now, I'm happy to answer before we jump in.
And again, remember, you can either type questions in the chat or you can raise your hand, and we will unmute you so that you can ask your question out loud if you'd like.
Yes.
All right, and I don't see any questions so far, but again, if you like, just pop them in the chat or let us know if you want to ask your question out loud.
Okay, cool. So let's dive right in. What do I mean when I talk about the Finder? So what is that all about? The Finder is the gateway to all of your files, folders, your apps, your downloads on your Apple computer. The Finder is going to use windows and icons to show you the contents of your Apple computer, your iCloud, or other storage devices that you may have plugged in, such as a flash drive or an external hard drive. Even a memory card you may have plugged into your computer. It's called the Finder really simply because it helps you find your files. Apple's really good about making things easy to understand, and I think the Finder is probably the encapsulation of the naming conventions that they use. Your Finder is going to be, of course, native to your computer. You don't have to install it. It's already going to be there. And we'll talk about how to access your Finder in just a second. But yeah, let's go ahead and, of course, I have a question slide here. I just asked for questions, but if you have them, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'll go ahead and move on though. So how do you access your Finder? So there's several ways to navigate to the Finder on your computer. So why don't I just go ahead and we'll jump right into the demonstration portion. And of course, I'm going to be following the handout slides while I'm doing the demonstration. So at any time you're lost of where we are, you can always access the slides that Susan posted in the chat, or of course you can access that later. We'll also be sending out that link in the email for the handout. So this is all going to be covered in the handout. Don't think that I'm just, winging it by doing the demo. It's all in that handout. So let me go ahead and get out of the PowerPoint here. Oops. I meant to close that out there. All right. So I hope you're kind of seeing my desktop there.
Yes, we are. I am seeing your desktop screen. Yep.
Okay, cool. So like I was saying before, there are multiple ways to find your Finder on your Apple computer. So one of the easiest ways is to actually look in your dock. So that is that strip of icons down at the bottom of your Apple computer. You may also have your dock to the left or to the right of your desktop. We talked a little bit about the dock in our last class, but that dock is going to be where your icons are for your applications that you access pretty frequently. And the Finder is going to be that leftmost, for us, the leftmost icon that kind of looks like a happy face that's got two colors. It's kind of split right down the middle. That's the Finder. And you'll see that I have my mouse hovered over it and it says Finder. So of course yours may be in a different spot on your dock because you can move the icons around, but it's always going to look like that. So I could just click on that right from my dock and it will open the Finder for me. Now it's going to open a window, which is probably going to be your recents folder. So it might be looking slightly different on your computer depending on how you have it set up and what your operating system is. Ours is the most recent operating system, which is Monterey, but you may have also heard of Big Sur or Catalina. Those are both pretty recent operating systems for your Mac computer. There is also another way to access the Finder. You can go into your search up here in your menu bar. So if I click on the little magnifying glass, I can make a search using Spotlight Search. I can just type in Finder.
So Rebecca, I'm going to stop you there for just a second. Everyone, if you're, I know that Rebecca's mouse might look a little small to us, but she is right now up in the top right corner, just next to the clock and the date. That second icon from the right there, the first one I think is that battery, your battery life?
The first one here, yeah, that's battery, and then it
Wi-Fi.
goes to my connections, my profile information, and then there's a small little magnifying glass icon that I tapped on.
And that's where we are to find that Spotlight search. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, of course. And once you click that, it should say Spotlight Search. I typed in Finder. And then of course you could tap on that application there from your search results. And then it should open up a new Finder window for you. You can also, if you're on your desktop, let me close out of this window. If you're on your desktop and there's no other window open and you're not inside of any application, you'll see up at the top left corner in your menu bar, you'll see it says Finder. So if you see another application name there, you're probably inside of another application such as Chrome, maybe you're in Safari, maybe you're in your App Store or your photos. If you click off of that onto your desktop in an empty space, that should revert back to where it says Finder. And then from there, what you can do is you can click File and you can click New Finder Window. And that should open up a Finder window for you. And from there, you can explore your Finder. So those are the three kind of main ways that you open up the Finder. Any questions so far?
I don't see any questions in the chat or any raised hands, but again, feel free as we go through stuff to ask any questions you might have.
Yes. All right, let's actually go on a little bit of a tour of that menu bar. So that menu bar, again, is that stationary bar that's at the very top of your desktop. And it's going to have to the right, of course, some of the controls, maybe to connect you to Wi-Fi or, again, do the Spotlight search. It may also have your date and your time up there. And to the left, on the top left corner of your menu bar, you should have your Apple menu, which of course can get you to things like your system preferences or your power settings, such as shutting down or restarting. But then of course you're going to get into your app menus. So right now we're in the Finder, so it's going to have different menus concerning the Finder. And of course, if you're maybe inside of another app, maybe you're in Safari. Let's open up Safari. Of course, now it's changed up here to Safari instead of to Finder, and these menus are going to be concerning what you can do inside of Safari. But again, if I click off of Safari onto a blank spot on my desktop, you'll see how it switches back to Finder because I'm no longer selected my Safari page, and I can even minimize that window. And now I'm in the Finder. So I have a File menu, I have an Edit menu, I have a View menu, a Go menu, a Window menu, and a Help menu. And we're going to cover some of these today, but these are what pops up when you're inside of your Finder. And of course, I don't have a Finder window open, but you're still going to have these menus available to you even if you don't have a Finder window open.
Rebecca, is
So
this
let's actually,
basically that Finder is open, but it's kind of like hanging out in the background?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably, the Finder is always open. It doesn't really let you quit out of it. It lets you restart it, like if it's frozen or something, but I cannot quit out of the Finder. I think it's Apple's way of just kind of letting you be able to access, it's kind of like the background of your computer.
Mhm.
So it's like, I don't know how to describe it without saying it's like always running, but it's kind of always there. If you're not in an application, you're in your Finder.
Okay, thank you.
And if you have a Windows PC, File Explorer is available to you instead of the Finder. But in my experience while using a PC, it's not always open like Finder is. Like you won't
Correct.
see, like Windows doesn't have this menu bar at the top. It's slightly different in a Windows like user interface. So I think this is just the way that Apple runs, and they just like the Finder because it really just helps you get into all those things that you may not have on your desktop. And I think that's probably why they have it going all the time, is because Apple likes to, I think, keep their stuff kind of clean and out of the way. Like with a Windows PC, you have that whole start menu, right, that you can jump into stuff from, but Apple doesn't really have that. So I think they use the menu bar as sort of another kind of way to access things. And the Finder is that gateway into your computer, really. If that makes sense. I know I'm kind of rambling now, but that's how I understand it. All right. Any further questions?
It doesn't look like we have any other questions at the moment.
Okay. So let's actually talk about some of those menus up there in your menu bar when you're accessing your Finder. So the File menu is one of the most important menus. If I click on it, we'll see it pop up here. Actually, let me open a new File Finder window here so I can have that kind of in the background over here. I'm going to move that over here. So the Finder, of course, it's got just the Finder menu, which doesn't give you very many options, but the File menu is a pretty important menu. So it's going to allow you to perform different functions, including opening a new Finder window, which is what I just did, creating a new folder. You can get information about items like files or folders that you have created. You can compress files, you can move files to the trash, you can print, you can share things with people. So there's a lot of different things you can do from the File menu. And sometimes it changes depending on what you have selected. So you'll see as I have my File menu open, there's a lot of items that are grayed out. And those are grayed out because I'm not interacting with anything currently. I have a window open, but I don't have anything selected. So if I actually select something, and what I mean by select is I'm just going to tap on it so that it highlights it. So I'm tapping on a file that I have saved in my recents folder. So if I go back to my File menu after I click on something, then you'll notice some of my things are accessible. So for instance, I can get information about a file, and we're going to talk a little bit more about file properties later. But now you'll see that I have more options now that I've selected something. So again, that might change depending on what you have clicked on. Okay, let's talk about the Go menu next. So the Go menu I also use pretty often when I'm using the Finder. The Go menu is going to allow you to access different areas of your computer that you may not see right when you get logged on. So for instance, You can access a folder with your downloads. You can access a desktop folder. You can access your iCloud drive, an applications folder, utilities folder. And in the handout, I've actually outlined, I've broken down each of these items in your Go menu and what they do. So of course, for instance, recents, that would be all of the files that you've accessed recently or recently opened. Your documents folder, of course, is where you've decided to put your documents. Now, Apple also creates folders by default. So you may find a documents folder on there already that you may not have created yourself. Apple usually kind of gives you a couple folders to get you started, like main folders. Like you'll see a documents folder, you'll see an applications folder. So a documents folder is kind of Apple's way of saying, hey, put your documents here. Now, of course, you don't have to, it's up to you. But that's a good place to start if you want to start storing some of your documents.
Do they have one like pictures, like
Yes,
Windows
they do.
does? Okay.
Yes. Once we open a window again, I'll show you how to access a pictures menu.
Great. Thank you.
Or pictures folder. Yeah, they make it kind of nice. They create that little like guide for you, like, hey, I'm a pictures folder, put your pictures here. So you don't have to like, go and create something immediately. It's already there. But there's also a desktop folder, which is really handy, especially if you have a lot of stuff on your desktop. Some people, my mom included, have just so much stuff on their desktop. I saw her recently and I was like, man, Mom, you got to clean up your desktop a little bit. It's getting a little cluttered.
Did you feel a little bit
it works for her, I guess.
Did you feel a little bit like tables have turned from her asking you to clean up your room when you were a kid?
The tables do turn a little bit when you get older with your parents, but I guess that's another conversation.
Yes.
But yes, I was like, her desktop was cluttered. So, if your desktop is cluttered, the desktop folder is really helpful because it will help you kind of be able to view the things on your desktop more easily. So if I were to click on desktop, of course, there's going to be nothing except for what's on my desktop in that folder. Yours may look different, of course, depending on what you have on the desktop. So for us, it's just Zoom right now because that's the application we have on the desktop. Let me go back here. There's also the downloads folder.
Rebecca, that's also for the desktop folder that has Zoom in it. Is that because the Zoom application is actually, we can see that shortcut to it on the desktop?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I put Zoom on the desktop just so, we had something on there, and I like sometimes to put applications on the desktop because maybe I access them often. Again, it's up to you what you put on your desktop. A lot of people will put frequently used folders or frequent items that they're accessing pretty often, like for example, Zoom. They may put that on their desktop because they don't want to have to go hunting inside of a folder to find what they're looking for. Let me go back here to our Go menu. You'll also see a downloads folder. So that will be the stuff that you download from the internet. So maybe you're on your email and you've downloaded an attachment. It's probably going to go to your downloads folder unless you have it saved somewhere else. Downloads would be the default folder it will go to. I like to have my downloads folder in my dock. Some people keep it in their dock, but of course, if you don't, you can always access it through your Go menu. The home folder is also a pretty important folder because that's actually your user folder. So if you have multiple users on your computer, your home folder is going to be specific to you. So you may have folders in there that another user on your computer does not have. So maybe you have files related to some pictures or some personal documents that you only have when you're logged in. And then when someone else logs in, they will not have access to that. So your home folder is your user folder, essentially.
Rebecca, we have a question about the downloads folder. Does the downloads folder also include recent downloads, like if you've updated your operating system?
I think so. I think if you updated your operating system, it's downloading something from, let me check and see what's in ours. I only have like 4 things in ours, but I think, yes, if you download an operating system from Apple's website, for instance, it might appear there, or it might appear in your applications. It's hard to say without actually going through that process, but I can look more into that.
Okay. And if you downloaded, say you downloaded an application from the internet, so you downloaded like the file that you then open and install, would that be, would that go into downloads and then you would click on it to install the application?
I'm not 100% sure. I don't want to tell you the wrong thing without
Okay.
actually going through the process of doing it.
We'll put that one in the follow-up email then too,
Okay. Yeah.
about
I would want to test that theory
installing
first.
applications. Yeah. And yes, so we just got a question that came through about, so it's not wise to delete downloads in total. And I think you could speak to that now if you want while you're talking about the files.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on like what you were talking about with installing applications. So you may find that you have an installer or something like that in your downloads folder. Once you've installed the application, you don't really need the installer anymore, so you can delete that. I mean, again, it's up to you. A lot of this class is just sort of laying the groundwork for you to make your own decisions. So it really depends on what you like to keep for your personal records and on your personal device.
And you
And
might,
we'll talk more about best practices as well.
yeah, and I was going to say, you might consider, Rebecca's going to explain how to move files also. So
Yes.
you might find that, say you've downloaded a picture that was sent to you via email, then what you might do is it's going to show up in your downloads folder, but you really want to keep that picture. You might then just say, okay, I'm going to move it to the pictures folder. So it's no longer in the downloads folder. So, occasionally one of our best practice things that I'm sure Rebecca will mention is, going and taking a look at what's in your folders and then moving them and organizing them. So you wouldn't necessarily just delete everything that's in your downloads folder, but you might go through and place them where you want them to be.
Exactly. It's just like any other folder on your computer. It's not temporary files. It's files that are saved to your computer that you may want to have access to, like pictures, like Susan, like you were saying, or like for us, we have the PowerPoint file for today's class, and I may want to create a folder maybe to keep all of those PowerPoints in one place, but it will come from the internet into your downloads folder first, and then it's up to you to decide where it goes from there. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, the comments also included that the customer or person is afraid to delete things that they don't automatically recognize from folders.
I mean, it also will help to open the files and see if they are something that you want to keep. If you don't know what it is, yeah, open it up, check it out, see what it is. Now, if you've downloaded it from an email that you don't know who it's from, or you're not sure of the sender or the actual file, I would say don't even download it. Especially nowadays with people trying to get access to people's computers or data, you want to be careful what you're downloading from the internet. If you're not sure what it is, I would say don't do it.
And Rebecca's going to talk a little bit about how to identify things by what they are, or what they are based on the information you can find when you click on the info about it, its properties, and that may also help you figure out what something is.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. And of course, there's so many different possibilities of things. You may have gotten something you forgot about and it's still living in your downloads folder years later. But we're going to talk about all of that kind of thing in a little bit, about how to manage some of those files. But let's go back to our Go folder, because I want to talk about a couple more things. We talked about home. So the computer folder would be just all of the files that are on your computer. So if I click on computer, that will bring me to a folder where it's got my hard drive in it. So that's actually the hard drive on my computer, so I can get in there and that will access all my files. Or I can get into my network. That would be like just the network I'm on, the internet basically. I don't really go into my computer folder unless I really need to mess around with something, but for me, I don't use it that much. You may find that you use it more. So the network, of course, is all of your network connections, like maybe your Wi-Fi information. Let me close out of that window there. Your airdrop is going to be how you can wirelessly send things to people. So for instance, I could send a photo via airdrop, I could send videos, I could send websites. AirDrop is just a thing that Apple uses. You may also see AirDrop on your iPhone if you have an iPhone or an iPad. Network, we just talked about, that's all of your network connections. iCloud Drive is a pretty important folder too. If you have iCloud set up on your computer, of course, that's Apple's version of cloud storage. So you can save things into your iCloud Drive by using that folder. Your shared folder is going to be like if you want to share an item that you have on your computer with somebody else that uses the computer. I believe that would be a shared folder between all of the users on your computer. So maybe you have 2 users on your computer and you guys are trying to collaborate on something, or you're sharing photos. You can put them in that shared folder and then you'll both see it while you're on your respective login. The applications folder is also pretty useful. Let me open that one up. So that one is just going to display all of the applications that you have in your computer. And of course, I could open up an application from this folder. So maybe I wanted to open up, let's open up podcasts. I could just double click on podcasts and that would open up for me. So that's another way you can actually open an application if you were trying to search for an application that maybe was not on your desktop or was not in your dock. You could go to your applications folder from the Go menu. So that's kind of a handy way to get to something, because sometimes people have hundreds of applications, right? And they can't fit all of them on their screen or in their dock. They will live in their applications folder. Utilities is also an important folder. Let me go to that one. That's right underneath applications. So that one has a little bit more, some of the applications that you have for some of the utilities on your computer. So for instance, you can get into your screenshot application. You can get into your terminal, which is kind of like Apple's version of their coding system. You can get into disk utilities. So if you need to fix something with your hard drive, keychain access is your passwords that you have saved on your computer. Airport utility is information about your Wi-Fi. Maybe you have a router at home, you can connect through airport utility. There's just other utilities in there that have to do with the operations of your computer. So I would say if you're trying to clean up space on your computer, I would avoid utilities at all costs. Don't mess with anything in that folder. I usually don't even touch anything in there unless I maybe need a screenshot every once in a while. I would not delete anything in there. All right. Any questions about the Go folder?
Yeah, so we had a question about AirDrop. If you can go over a couple details about AirDrop real quick, about where does AirDrop go to, or to whom can you send stuff? And if you receive something through AirDrop, where does it land?
If you receive something through AirDrop, I believe you have the option to download it to your computer. I think I've used AirDrop maybe a couple times, so I'm not too familiar with it, and I'll actually write this down so I can send this out in an email. But the way I understand AirDrop is that it will connect to someone via Bluetooth. So if someone has Bluetooth on in your range of where you are, you can send something to them via Bluetooth from your computer. So maybe you're wanting to send them a picture via AirDrop. They would have to accept it. It doesn't just automatically go to them. I believe you have to accept it to get the AirDrop, and you can deny an AirDrop, as far as I know.
Yes,
I'll look more into AirDrop.
I've got the
It's
support page from Apple up right now.
okay.
And it does say that, yes, basically it's using a Bluetooth connection, and you would send, basically, if you want to send someone a file, you would open AirDrop, they'll appear if they're on Bluetooth and you're connected to them, and you basically click on their profile picture, and then you can drag documents to send to them. When you receive content through AirDrop, you also will get a notification telling you that there's a request to send you something, and then you say accept to receive it, and then it will most likely go into your downloads folder.
So it's a quicker way to send something to somebody rather than like logging into your email and attaching something to a file, to a email or something like that. It's just a quick kind of way. I think it's becoming more common than it used to be, especially on devices, like if you're on an iPhone.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I know that since I have an iPad, I also have the capability to use AirDrop on my iPad. So one thing you might consider doing is if you have a MacBook and another device and you want to share photos across those devices with someone else, you would use AirDrop to do that, even maybe within your own family. If you all have iPads, you'll share it from iPad to iPad, or, you know, from iPad to Mac. So
yes.
And that's I'm going to go ahead and put the support page in here too, Rebecca, into the chat for everyone.
Okay.
Where
I'll write it down
was
too,
looking
so
that up.
send it for the follow-up email.
So it's just support.apple.com, and then you can look up whatever. Oops, and I sent that just to panelists, not to everyone. Sorry about that. And that is something that I think we use quite often to help with parts of Apple stuff.
Yes, I use it very, very often.
How much I know about Apple that I say for Apple stuff.
Apple stuff.
I'll let you get into the more technical detail about what Apple stuff is.
It's a lot of things.
Yes.
Okay, so that's pretty much the menu bar up at the top. Your window menu will concern, like if you have an open Finder window, this will let you kind of navigate inside of that. And of course, we're going to talk about the help menu, but there is a help menu up there if you need some help with the Finder. We're going to talk about that a little later though. Let's actually go on a tour of the open Finder window. So let me open a new window. So again, to open a new Finder window, while I'm in the Finder, I have to see that Finder thing up there in the top menu bar, and I click File, New Finder Window. So this is going to open up a Finder window where then I can go in and navigate around. Now the menu bar was again going to help you navigate once you have that window open, or it'll help you get to a folder. So for instance, within the Go menu, I could go into my Documents or my Downloads folder. But if I just do New Finder Window, that's going to probably most likely take me to my Recents folder, which is things I've opened recently. So for me, you'll see a bunch of screenshots in there because I took a bunch for the PowerPoints, and you'll see my PDF file for the PowerPoint that we're doing today. But there are a number of things outside of just those files that are showing up. So you'll see on the left side of my window here, there is a list here that says Favorites. And then it's got a bunch of folders that I can access from here as well. And Susan, you were saying Pictures. So we have our Pictures folder here. And this part here on the side is called the sidebar. So Apple is referring to that as the sidebar. So if you ever hear me talking about the sidebar, that's this portion of my Finder window that has all of these lists and categories here. So in my favorites, of course, I could change these as well. These are what came as a default on my computer when we started up. I shouldn't say mine, this is the library's computer. Started up the computer. These were the favorites that Apple decided for us. But of course, we could change those if we wanted to. We can also move these around on here. They don't have to be that way. You can change those. And I could take these off too. So if I wanted to remove something from the sidebar, I could take it off of there if I wanted to. I also see the option here for iCloud. So I see my desktop, my iCloud drive, and my shared folder. So my iCloud drive would be things, of course, that I put on the iCloud. So I could put pictures in there, I could put documents, etc., etc. I also have a locations here. So this would be anything that you have plugged into your computer, So maybe you have a USB drive that you've plugged in that would show up under locations. You may have an external drive, a memory card. Those will show up under locations once you have them plugged into your computer. So maybe you have gotten a flash drive from somebody and they're wanting to give you some pictures. And once you plug that flash drive in, where am I finding that flash drive now? You'll find it under locations in your sidebar of your Finder. You'll also see there is tags down here. So tags is a way that you can kind of sort things within your computer. We're not really going to cover tags today because it's a little more complicated, but you can actually tag items. So for instance, maybe we tagged certain things with a blue tag, then we could search for them later using that tag. Again, we're not really going to cover that, but if you need more information, you can also visit the Apple support page. They have information about tags on there. Okay, so you'll also see, let me go back to our recents folder here, that there are some icons up here at the very top of our Finder window. So what do these all do and what do they mean? Okay, let's talk about that. So up at the top, you'll see, of course, the file or the folder name. So I'm in the recents folder, so I am seeing that it says recents. Of course, if I was on my documents folder, it would change over to documents. If I was in pictures, it would say pictures. So yeah, that name is going to be your file or your folder name. I'm sorry, I keep saying file. That's your folder name. Of course, I could rename my folder too. It doesn't have to be pictures. It doesn't have to be documents. You can name things whatever you want them to be. Apple will, of course, name certain folders that come on your computer already. Of course, you'll see the downloads folder, documents, pictures will already be there when you open up your computer for the first time. I can also, let me get back into recents. I can also change the way that I'm seeing files in my Finder window by using these different icons here. These are my view options. So these 4 icons, if you see my mouse up at the very top of my Finder window, there's 4 little icons up there. Right now I'm in the icons view. So that's going to show all of the things in my folder as icons. So it kind of gives me a small preview of what I'm looking at visually. I also have a list option here, which is the one right to the right. So if I click on that, that's going to show all my files as a list. You may have more information that's showing up as well, such as the size of the file, what type of file it is. So for instance, maybe it's a JPEG file or a PDF document. I also have mine set up to show when I last opened it. So we could sort it also by clicking on any one of these here. It will allow us to sort by size. Maybe we want to sort alphabetically here. We could do that as well by just tapping on that. And I could change it the opposite way too if I wanted to do Z to A or A to Z. I can also sort by columns. So columns will kind of show you some of the nesting folders that you have. Let me get into my pictures folder and show you what that looks like. So if I'm in my pictures and I have it sorted by columns, then I could see what I have in certain folders and I can see them nested in there. So that kind of gives me a quicker and easier way to kind of see in some of the nesting folders that I have. When I say nesting folders, that means a folder inside of a folder or a file inside of a folder, kind of like nesting dolls, if you've ever had those. I used to have a bunch of those when I was a kid. You can also view things, let me go back to recents here. You can also view things in a gallery view. So that will give you a bigger preview and give you some more information about your file. So for us, we can, of course, get a preview of this cat picture and when I last opened it, what the dimensions are, maybe what size it is. There's a bunch of information there. I can also do a couple things. I can rotate the image, I can mark up, so that will allow me to add things like words I can write on it or draw on it. There's a bunch of different options you could do through the gallery view. Let me go back to the icon view. You can also zoom in and out by using this at the bottom right corner of my Finder window. I have a slider bar here that will let me slide the size up. Like if I wanted to make it bigger, here, let me make it not so big. Like I can make it big like that, or I can make it smaller, depending on how much you want to fit on one screen. So you can use that slider bar. You'll also notice that I have a path bar down here. So a path bar is going to show me the path that I have to take to get to this particular photo that I have selected. So I have this cat photo selected right now, and down here it's showing me the path to my photo. So it's in my computer under the CPL user, it's in my pictures folder, and it's in my screenshots folder, and the file name is catscratches.jpg. So of course, if I clicked on a different, let me go into my documents here. Let me see. I think we have, actually, I'm going in pictures here, screenshots. And then if I was in maybe a different screenshot one, then you'll see my file path has changed a little bit because I have gotten into a different folder. So this is available from the view menu, and you'll have to have the path bar enabled here. So I have my path bar enabled. If you don't have it, you can click on that show. It should say show path bar. Here, let me hide it. So if it says show path bar, then I have the ability to turn that on. It's helpful for me to have the path bar on because sometimes I just like seeing where I am in my computer. So I like to have that path bar enabled. And again, that's this bar at the very bottom here showing my path to my file. Right underneath it, I have my status bar. So my status bar is going to show me what I have like what is in my folder. So I have 30 things in my folder and I have one of those things selected. It says 1 of 30 selected. And I also have 216.6 gigabytes available to me on my computer. So of course your status bar may be different depending on what is in your computer, what folder you're in, what you're accessing. And that's going to be, of course, available if you go into your view menu. It's going to be called the status bar. So we have ours enabled, but if you don't, you can click on where it says show status bar, and that's going to show you a little bit more information about what's in your folder. I like to have that enabled as well because it shows me how many items are in my folder and how many gigabytes I have available. So for instance, if we're in our iCloud drive, it's going to show me how much is available on my iCloud. I have 3.94 gigabytes available. I like to have it enabled to like applications folder. It says I have 46 items in that folder. It's helpful for me to see that information. Now, of course, you don't have to have that enabled. It's up to you. I'm just trying to show you that there are multiple things you can do to make that information available to you if you want it. What's nice about Apple computers, of course, is it's really super customizable. So that's one of those things you can do to customize your experience. You can also search, of course, within your Finder. Now, we talked about Spotlight search before, and that was from your menu bar. But there is another search that you can do just from your Finder window. So I could go and click on this search button. Of course, that looks like a magnifying glass, and that's in my top right corner here. So if I wanted to make a search, I could click on that. And then a little search bar is going to come up where I can go in and search. So let's search for something. I know I have a file somewhere in my computer that's about a cat, and maybe I've named it something cat. So let's type in cat and see what pops up. So once I type, of course, it's going to bring me all of the things that contain those 3 letters, cat. Now that may be something that's within the properties of the file, or it's maybe inside of another word like this one. It looks like catalyst. It's pulling that one. And I have 2 pictures named Tiny Cat 1, Cat Scratches JPEG. So that's going to search your full computer as long as you're selecting where it says this Mac while I do my search here. If I click on recents, that's only going to search within my recents folder. So keep that in mind. If you click this Mac, it's going to search your whole computer. If you click recents, it's only going to show recent files. Okay, I know I threw a lot of information at you. Do you have any questions so far?
Don't see any questions so far. Again, feel free to raise your hand. And I can also call on you if you'd like to speak a question out loud rather than putting it in the chat. I have a quick question for you, Rebecca, about
Yes.
the recents folder.
Yeah.
And recents is essentially things that you have opened recently.
Yeah.
Or is it also, so it's things that you've basically touched, right? Or done
Yes.
something with on the computer. Okay.
Correct.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So of course you may see your recents folder change from day to day depending on what files you're working with. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And it helps to in your recents folder because these files don't live there. They're just compiled for you in that recents folder. So something in your recents folder may live in a different folder. So you can see as I've got something selected there in my path bar down at the bottom, you'll see it actually lives in a screenshots folder within my pictures folder. So the recents folder is not actually like a permanent folder. It's just where things go that you've touched recently so that it is going to help you access something that you may want or you're using right now.
It's essentially a
I find it
shortcut,
helpful.
right?
Yeah, sort of. It's just kind of a helpful way of Apple saying, hey, you might have been using this file recently. Do you want to keep working with it? And it compiles it into one folder so you can access it quicker.
Great.
I hope that helps decipher that a little bit better. Okay.
Other questions for Rebecca about either recents folders or using the Finder and customizing it for your path or anything of that nature?
We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the other options as well.
Perfect. Okay. I don't see any questions so far.
Okay, cool. So that was just a quick overview of what it looks like when you open a Finder window. So of course, there are all those options that you have with viewing. Now, I didn't go over the view menu yet. We're going to talk about that in a second, but there are a couple more things in there I want to highlight. But first, I want to show you that there is a couple things you can do with the actual window. So if you're in your top left corner, you'll see some controls up here. So those will let you close the window, minimize the window, or expand the window to your full screen. So if you want to close the window, of course, you're going to hit that red button with the X. If I hover over it, it shows up with an X. If I want to minimize the window, which means I can hide it without closing it, I would click on that yellow button. So let me do that right now. So for me, minimizing means it's going to go down into my dock on my desktop. So my dock is, of course, this strip of icons here. And that Finder window that I've minimized is going to be down here. And I can access it again just by tapping on it. So I can tap on it. So of course, that's not closed. It's just hidden away. So maybe I can work on something on the desktop. I can open up a different application, or I can work on something else while that is still open in the background. I use minimize very, very often. I also use the green button, which is going to maximize my screen to the full size so that I can work on it without any distractions. This is helpful, especially if you have a big list of things and you're having trouble looking at it. I recommend trying it with full screen and seeing if it's easier for you to use. And of course, you can get out of the full screen if you go back up to the top here. You hover your mouse near the top and you can click on that green button again and it should go back down to that size that it was previously. I can also hit the escape button. If I can't find that button, I can just hit escape on my keyboard and it will bring me back down to my size. All right. Now let's talk a little bit more about the view options from the menu bar. So that, of course, was inside of the view menu. So you can see those view options I have here. Let me go back. So I, of course, can make, like I was saying before, I can view them as icons, as a list, as columns, as gallery. Of course, I can also hide my sidebar as well if I don't want to see my sidebar. Now, I find my sidebar extremely helpful, but some people like to hide it. Let me show you what it looks like if I hide it. Hide sidebar. So now it's just going to show my folder without all that information on the side. And of course, I can get back to that if I want it by showing the sidebar.
How do you navigate between higher and lower folders without the sidebar?
You can go to your Go menu. Some of the
Okay,
folders are in there, or you can click Go to folder.
gotcha.
If I click Go to folder and I can type in, maybe I'm looking for pictures. Enter.
Okay.
Now you do have to know the exact name of your folder to be able to do that with typing. But that's why I don't like to hide my sidebar, because for me, the sidebar is going to help me navigate. Now, that's just me. Again, this is all my personal preference. This shouldn't influence what you're doing, but I find it extremely helpful to have the sidebar there. Of course, you can also go to the, you can do things like hiding your toolbar. So that would be that bar that's up at the top here. So the tools such as my icons for viewing or sharing things. Let me show you what that looks like if I hide that. So that is going to change it so that it looks like this here. And I don't have any of those icons for viewing.
A very minimalist perspective
Yes.
there.
Now, of course, I could change my view thing still by doing this here. I can do view as a list, view columns. There are still options. So it's kind of two things. You can have your toolbar, or you can use your view menu, or you can use both. I like to personally have mine on there because I think it's just easier to see. I think it does default to having it on there, but if you don't want it, of course, you can take it off. You can also customize your toolbar. So that will let you add in some more tools that you may want to use. So maybe you want to add a trash button in there. Maybe you want to be able to delete something really quick. I could drag that into my toolbar. Let's put it over here. So I just dragged that in there. Or maybe I want to have a path bar up in there. So I'm just clicking and dragging these icons and adding them into my toolbar. And of course, I could take these off if I didn't want them up there as well. Or I can drag the default back up there and it will revert it back to the default. And I could switch it to text if I wanted it to say text, or if I wanted it to be icons, or both. And then I can hit done, and now I have my toolbar customized to how I like it to look. There's a lot of different things you can do in terms of customization. Let me also show you, there is a way to adjust some things here. Let me go back into recents, and I'm going to show my thing as a list here. So as I was saying before, you can show different things here. So I currently have size, file, type, last date opened, but I can add more things onto this menu here. If I right click, and I can add different things. So maybe I had date added, or the version, date created, date modified. Sometimes I like date modified because that will help me sort by the most recent things I've touched inside of that folder. So let me go to my pictures. Okay, so this has date modified in it. So I could sort that maybe by something I was looking for that I worked on today. I could sort that to the top, and then I could access that super quick. Or of course I could sort by name, by size, by kind, or I could add more here. I could add maybe what version it is, whatever you want really. And I can also adjust these columns by tapping. There's a tiny little partition line between these columns up at the top where the name of the column is. And you'll see as my icon switches, it kind of looks like an arrow pointing in both directions. It's kind of tiny on this screen, but that will let me click and drag so that it maybe makes that column a little larger or smaller, especially with names. So let me go back to recent. So maybe your column is super small and you're having trouble reading those names. If I click and drag that, I can make that bigger so I can see that easier. And I can rearrange these too by holding and dragging with my mouse button. So maybe I wanted to switch some of these around. So again, these are super customizable for the way you can view things on your Finder. Any questions so far?
No questions so far.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about the sidebar earlier as well, but let me go ahead and explain that you can add more things to your sidebar. So let's see if I can, let me make that a little bigger so it's easier for me to see. I think if I go, oops. I think if I wanted to add a folder to the sidebar, I would have to drag it into there. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit because we're going to talk about making a folder. So we'll talk about how to add things to the sidebar when we do making a folder. But what you can do is you can customize your sidebar as well. If you go into, let's see, there is a way to get into there. So if I go to Finder and I go to Preferences, then I'll have another window pop up and I can click Sidebar. So that will let me change my sidebar preferences. So it looks like there's several folders I don't have enabled, such as movies and music, also CPL, that's my user folder. So maybe I wanted to put in my music folder, I could click on that. There's also some other location information I can mess with. That's just gonna let you show different items or take different items off of your sidebar. So now I have my music folder in there because I toggled that on in my preferences. Okay, I already did searching. So I think we're at our question slide next. Does anybody have any questions?
No questions at the moment. But again, feel free to either raise your hand if you'd like to speak a question out loud, if you don't want to type it in the chat.
Yes. Let me see here. I just talked a lot about navigating. So let's talk about creating some stuff. Let's talk about creating a folder, because that's a really important thing you probably are going to want to do on your computer, right? Especially if you have a lot of pictures or documents, even music, stuff that you want to get sorted. It's really helpful if you are able to make a folder and then kind of create your own sorting system that you can move stuff into certain folders, take stuff out, and basically customize your experience to make it easier for you to find stuff on your computer. Instead of it all just living inside of one folder, right? That's hard to deal with, especially if you have a lot of files. Okay, so to create a folder is pretty easy. There's a couple ways to do it. You can, of course, create folders on your desktop. You can create them within your Finder. You can put folders on your dock. There's a lot of different ways that you can interact with folders. And let's go ahead and create one on our desktop. So first things first is you want to decide, for us, we've decided we're going to put it on our desktop, but when you think about creating a folder, you want to think about where that folder is going to go, right? So that's important first step, is to decide where you want to put that folder first. So for us, we're going to put it on our desktop. So what we can do is we can go up to our Finder. So we're in our Finder right now, and we can click File, New Folder. So if I click on that, that's going to create a folder on my desktop because I'm currently on my desktop. If I had a Finder window open, let's open a Finder window. Maybe I'm in my Pictures folder, right? And I want to create another folder inside of here. I could do the same thing. Since I'm in my Pictures folder already, Finder is like, hey, she must want to create a folder inside of there, so we're going to put it in there. So all I would do, of course, again, is File, New Folder. And now it's going to create that folder inside of the Pictures folder, since that's where I've decided I wanted it to go. And of course, it's going to let me change the name here. So maybe I wanted to create a 2021 folder for all the photos I took during last year. So I can name it 2021. And of course, once I name it, I can always go back and change that name if I decide I want it to be something different. I'll talk about that in a second as well. There's also a way that you can move things into folders as well. So let's talk about that, unless there's any questions about how to create a folder.
Rebecca, will you show us really quickly how you added a new folder to the sidebar? Just a quick recap of that, please.
So there's kind of two ways. So I went through the sidebar preferences to enable the music folder in there, but I could also drag a folder inside of there as well. So let me go back to the preferences. So what I did first is I went to Finder, Preferences, and then here I could enable different folders that were already on there potentially. So usually if you have a Mac computer and you've just started it up for the first time, it's going to have all of these options here. But of course, I could add something in there that wasn't on this list if I wanted to. So I can show that right now too. So let me close this. So if I wanted to add something here, maybe I had a folder that I accessed pretty often that I wanted to go in my favorites. I could just click and drag it into there from a location. So we can click and drag this 2021 folder and put it in there. All I have to do is click and hold down on my mouse button and then drag it right underneath one of these or on top of. So what I'm doing right now is I'm not letting go of my mouse button because I haven't decided where I want it to go yet. And you'll notice there's two different things that are happening. So one thing that's happening is it's highlighting the folder in blue, or it's creating a line underneath or above a folder. So if it's highlighting in blue, that means it's going to put the folder inside of that folder. But if it's got the line, that means it's going to add it to the list. So if I let go, now it's got my 2021 folder over there in my sidebar. Now, again, you want to be kind of careful with this if you're moving it over and it's highlighting it instead of having that line, because that highlight's going to mean it's going to move it over there inside of the folder and not as part of the list. It does take a little practice to get used to that. So again, if I'm highlighted, that means it's going to go inside of the folder. If it's got a line, that means it's going to create it as part of the list that I have going already. So I've got the line, I'm going to let go, and now it's in there. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And of course, I could always take that out. What I would do is I would right click on it and then remove from sidebar. Does anybody need to be shown how to do right clicking? Because I can show how to do that as well. I was going to cover that in a second, but I can show that now since I've been talking about it.
Okay, we do have a raised hand. So I'll go ahead and unmute them. But if you want to go ahead and show how to do the click, I think that's fine. And then we can have a master question.
Sure. So I covered right clicking in the last class, but it's a super important function that you'll want to use if you have an Apple computer. Of course, if you have a laptop, you're not going to have those two buttons as you may on a mouse or on a PC laptop. Sometimes they have those two buttons. With Apple laptops, they only have one button, so you have to rely on gestures or on keyboard shortcuts to get your right click. So there are two different ways to right click on your computer. The first way, and I would say the simplest way, is to hold down the control button on your keyboard and then click with your mouse. So I'm holding down control and I'm going to click. So now that's opened up a right click menu where then I could go in and do a couple things. So I can even, it looks like, create a new folder here on that location on my desktop. Let me go back to my Finder window and I'll do a right click from in here as well. So again, I'm going to hold down control and I'm going to mouse click, and now it's got my right click options. So again, I could go in here and I could rename my file. I could remove it from my sidebar if I didn't want it in there. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to remove it from my sidebar. There is also another way to right click, and it's by using gestures. So normally, of course, on your trackpad on your Apple computer, if you have a laptop, you're going to click down with one finger, right? But there is a way to right click by using two fingers. So let me go into my settings. You do have to enable this function. So to enable it, you're going to go to your system preferences, which is in your Apple menu up at the top left corner, system preferences. And then you're going to click on your trackpad preferences, which are down here sort of at the bottom, trackpad. And Apple calls it secondary click. So you'll notice that little animation there of somebody clicking with two fingers. So if I were interested in using the gesture instead of just the keyboard shortcut, I would have to enable that secondary click option. So if you do not have that enabled and you want to use that, make sure you go into your settings and click on the secondary click checkmark box. And of course, it does take a little practice to get used to some of the gestures. And if you're, having a hard time using the two fingers instead of one, I just recommend using the control button instead of trying to do the gesture. I find it helpful to use the control button because it makes it a little easier for me. Of course, you can also use a mouse. I really like using a mouse with my laptop, and it makes it easier for me. I don't have to worry about using gestures or touching the wrong thing on my trackpad. I often use a mouse if I wanted to do more intensive work because it makes it a lot easier. I'm able to control what I'm doing easier. So I recommend if you have trouble with all of that, just to use a mouse if you can.
Thank you. It looks like they've lowered their hand, but if you wanted to ask a question out loud and meant to raise your hand, please go ahead and raise it again, and I will let you allow you to talk. I don't want to miss that you had a question, but I do understand sometimes we click on it accidentally. So let us know.
My guess is they maybe raised their hand to say, yes, I would like you to show the right click thing.
Yeah, we did have someone else who said that they would like that. So thank you for doing that for us.
Cool. Yeah, it's super, super useful. I use it every single day. Okay. So let me go back to my Finder window. Open. Okay. Let me get into my recents folder here. Let me change my view icon. Okay. So again, I can also create a folder, of course, by right-clicking inside of my Finder window. And of course, I would want to decide where I'm creating my folder first. So let's create a folder inside of my documents here. So again, all I would do is I would right-click in here and click New Folder. Or of course, I could go to File, New Folder. And then now I have the option to name that folder and then start putting things in there. So let's see documents. Let's just do 2022 budget since we already have a 2021 budget. And now I've got my folder right there. Now there is a way to rename your folder, of course. So maybe I wanted to rename my Zoom folder. So maybe I wanted to rename it Zoom Recordings so it was more specific and I really understood what was in that folder. So what I would do here is I would select it. So I would just tap on it. And I could do two things. I could either go up to File, and then I could click on Rename. So that would let me rename it right there. Then I could do Zoom Recordings. Or I could use that right-click menu like I was doing before. I could right-click on it, and then I could click Rename from that menu that pops up. And of course, I could do other things from this menu as well. I could move it to my trash. I could share it with somebody. I could copy it, etc., etc. But that's what you'll do if you want to rename it. You can also move things around, of course. So I can just click my mouse button and drag here. If I wanted to move folders around, I could do that like this. And of course, this is in my icon view. If I was in my list view, it's not going to really let me move stuff around. It's more of letting me sort. So of course, I could sort by name and all that too. Okay. There is a way to select multiple items as well, and this is especially useful if you're trying to move things into folders, right? So maybe if you have a pictures folder and you're wanting to move stuff around, it's useful to know how to select multiple things at once so that it makes it faster for you, right? So let's go to our pictures folder. What I find useful is if I'm moving stuff around is to open a new Finder window and have two windows at one time so that it's really visual for me to see where things are going. I'm a super visual person and it helps me when I make things as easy as possible. So what I'm going to do to create or to open up a new Finder window is I'll go to File, New Finder Window. And that's just going to create another window that I can work with. So I've still got my other pictures window here in the background, but then I have my new folder here or my new window here where then I could go in and maybe move stuff to my pictures folder. So let's go ahead and move something. Let's go into my downloads folder. So I've downloaded a couple things and maybe I want to move them to my pictures folder. How do I do that? So I'm in my downloads folder. Maybe I want to move both of these tiny cat pictures in there, right? How do I select both of those? So there's a couple different ways on an Apple computer. What you can do is you can either tap on the photo and then hit Control and then tap, oh, no, I'm sorry, it's Command.
Command, right? Okay.
Yes, it is Command. It's Control on a Windows computer.
Yes.
So again, let me try that again. So I'm going to select something and all I'm doing is just tapping on it so that it highlights it and that text of the title is blue. So that means that I have it selected. If I want to select the other one or multiple pictures or items, I'll hold down the Command key and then just tap on whatever else I want to select. And that's super useful if you have a bunch of stuff on your computer in a list and you want to select certain items. Maybe they're out of order and you're selecting them from different points in the list. If you're using Command, then it's going to help you select just those things that you're clicking instead of the whole list. So let me kind of show you what that looks like if I'm in my recents folder. So look at all this stuff here. That's a lot to move over, right? I don't want to do that one by one because it'll take me forever. But I don't necessarily want to move everything, so I don't want to select everything. What I'm going to do, of course, is utilize that Command button. So I'm going to select the first thing that I want by just tapping on it so it's highlighted. I'm going to hold down Command, and then I'm going to select everything that I want to move over by just tapping on it. So you'll see that I'm able to go out of order. I'm able to select different things, and this is really useful to get into that detailed selection. And now those are all selected. So I'm going to move my window over a little bit so that I can see. To move these, all I have to do is click and drag those to where I want them to go. So it's really useful if you have all of your stuff ready. So I've got my pictures folder over here and it's ready and I want to move stuff into my screenshots, right? So I can click and drag. And now it's going to let me, and I'm going to hover that right over my screenshots folder and then let go. Now this does take a lot of practice, so keep that in mind. You may not get this right on the first time and it may be useful to do a little practice.
It's also probably worthwhile to practice with fewer. So if you
Yes, let
practice
me
with
do
like one
grape.
and two, so just grab like two things
Yeah,
and
let me
move
do
them.
the cats. So let me select those again.
And if you're
And let's put
practicing,
them into 2021 folder.
perfect. And if you're practicing this, take two things that you've put on your computer that you don't really care about, in order to do this practicing of dragging and dropping.
Yes, and like Susan was saying, it does help if you're doing a small amount if you're not comfortable with a big amount. And of course, little by little is better than getting it all mixed up. Whatever works for you, really. So I want to move these cat pictures into my 2021 folder, right? So let me open my 2021 folder so I have it ready. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these. And then I'm just going to click and drag them in to my 2021 folder over here. I'm just dragging them so they're in a blank spot in my folder, and I'm going to let go. And now they're in there. So now they're in my 2021 folder. Let me switch my view. And now they're there. So I moved them from my downloads folder into my 2021 folder. So now if I click again into my 2021 folder, there they are. So let me move them back so I can get a little more practice. There is also a way to select them by moving your mouse instead of using your keyboard. So let me move these over a little bit. So if I click on an empty space here in my folder and I drag my mouse, I notice a box starting to form. And as I move that box over different files, it's going to select them for me. Once I have all the files I want selected, I can let go, and now it's selected those. And of course, I could click and drag them where I want them to go, and now they're in my downloads folder. Again, this also takes practice. And it's usually only helpful to use this particular way of selecting things if you're in your icon view. If you're in your list view, it doesn't really work as well. I mean, it does, but I don't find it as easy to use. And sometimes you might drag stuff that you don't mean to drag.
And it also only works if things are next to each other, right?
Yes, exactly. So again, it's going to take you practice if you're not practiced at this already. It's just about getting used to the physical motion of doing it, and I find it especially helpful if I'm using a mouse. I don't always like using the trackpad because sometimes you touch something accidentally and all of a sudden you're not clicking down anymore or something weird's going on. So I recommend if you're having trouble using your trackpad to try using a mouse instead.
That's good advice.
Yes. I find it just helpful when I'm doing detail work and I want to make sure like I'm not going to mess anything up. I mean, I might do that anyways, but I find it easier, at least with the mouse. Okay, I know that was a lot, but does anybody have questions?
Would you show how to create the two windows again, please?
Yes. Okay, so let's start from scratch here. So we want to open two Finder windows, right? So let's go ahead and open our Finder. We've got our Finder window here. So how do I open a second window? There's two ways. The first way I showed you is to go up to the File and the New Finder window. And I click on that, and it's going to pop up a new window for me right on top. And then I could go in and change my location if I wanted to. Maybe I wanted to work with pictures. And this one I wanted to be my downloads folder so I can move stuff between my downloads and my pictures, right? Or my documents, whatever. You can also do a new Finder window by using a keyboard shortcut. So if I hit Command and the letter N is in Nancy, that's also going to create a new Finder window. And you'll see if I go to my File menu there, it's got the keyboard shortcut right there. It said that Command symbol and then N. That will do a new Finder window.
So if you
and
look,
it's also got a, go ahead.
If you look at your keyboard on your Mac, you should see the command symbol on that
It
key.
kind of looks like a pound sign almost.
Mm-hmm. I think it looks like a butterfly.
Yeah,
like,
it does sort of look like a stamp.
Sort of like a clover leaf on the interstate, maybe.
Yes. I don't know what that symbol is otherwise, but yeah, Apple uses that for the command. And you'll see the control button and the option button also have a symbol on that. So for instance, if I wanted to do a new folder, it's also got a keyboard shortcut there. It's an arrow up, Command, and then N. So there are a couple keyboard shortcuts, and I've included some of those in the handout. But usually when you're in some of the menus, you may see some symbols there. That's the keyboard shortcut. Okay, does that help answer their question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, of course. All right, so there are a couple of things you can do in terms of seeing some of the information about your file. So how do we do that? So let me go back to my pictures here. Let me get my cat pictures. I think they're back in my downloads folder. Yes. We can't have a computer class without a cat picture, right? Okay, so if you right click on a picture or an item such as a folder or even an application, it's going to give you some more options. So let's go ahead and right click on something and see what happens. So again, I'm just going to hit Control and then tap on my mouse button. So there are a couple options here. So of course I could open the file. Open with is going to let me decide which application I open this file with. So maybe I wanted to open it with Firefox or my preview application. I can also move it to the trash. So if I wanted to maybe consider throwing this away, I could just hit that move to trash button. I can also, of course, rename it like we talked about before. I could copy it, I could duplicate it, I could share it, I could tag it. Maybe I was using tags and I wanted to tag it. There's a couple of actions I could do here too. I could create a PDF, I could make it my desktop picture, I could convert the image. There's a bunch of different stuff you can do within this menu, but the common ones that I use this menu for are the get info, the rename, and the move to trash. So the get info button is also super useful. So let me click on that. That is essentially going to show you the properties of the file that you've selected. So for us, we can see information about the file such as the file type. I know this type is really small, but it's telling us that it's a PNG image. It's telling me what size it is, where I can find it. So this is the path for the file here that I've highlighted. I can also see when the file was created, if I modified it, when that was. I can also rename it from here as well, if I wanted to. I could get a little preview here. There's a couple other things as well. I could see the permissions for the file. So maybe if it was a document, I could decide if someone was only able to read it. So there's a lot of information in this little file properties. So you may have used a Windows computer before. It's sort of essentially file properties from a Windows PC. Apple calls it get info. I could do that on an application too, I think. Let me check.
So even though the cat is tiny, the information is large.
Yes, I renamed it Tiny Cat. It was some random file name. But I could do that the same for like a application or a folder. So this is telling me this is an application and what size it is, the preview for the file or for the application, which is just the icon that it uses, copyright information, et cetera, et cetera. So of course this will change depending on which file or folder you're getting the info for.
So it also works for folders?
Yes, let me see if I can get into a folder and see if it'll do it. Of course, it's not going to tell me very much because a folder is just a folder. It doesn't have much to it. But it will tell me where it is, so that may be useful. You can see the file path. You can see when it was created.
And you can see that five items are inside it.
Yep. So if I were to go to, maybe if I were to go to the Apple Computers training, there may be a different number there. Yeah, this one says 2 items. So it may tell you how much is in that folder. But of course, I could also do that by opening the folder and then just seeing what was in there or seeing what the status was on the status bar on my Finder window. There's tons of different stuff you can do. All right, any questions about file properties?
Do you want to talk just very briefly about extensions?
Yes. So the extensions, that would be referring to if you're opening something like a file, it may have an extension like dot, for instance, ours .png here with the TinyCat file. You may also see a document file that is maybe, let me see if I have one. I don't think I have a .doc file actually, but you may have heard of files like PDF files, so it might say .pdf. Where did here we go. So for us, there's also like .mp4, .jpeg. So those are going to be referring to the type of file it is. The file extension, yeah, basically just refers to the file type unless I'm missing something about it.
And it basically tells the computer what program to open it with first. So
Yes.
if it's a PNG, it might open with, in the case of your Apple, it might open with the preview application first. If it's MP4, it might open with your, certain audio player as the first choice.
Yes. And I can also tell it where to open as well. If I right click on it and I click on open with, then instead of just opening with a default application, it may let me decide another application for it to open with.
So
that's especially useful for like photos or stuff like that.
yeah, so when we were talking earlier about identifying things in your downloads folder and trying to figure out what they are, those extensions may help you figure out what it was. Because you might be able to say, okay, I don't know what this is, but it looks like it's a JPEG. So at least then I know it's a picture, or
Yes.
it's an MP4. That means it's a movie, or like a video of something. So when you're trying to figure out what things are, the file properties are going to be a great way for you to help you figure out what it is.
Yes. And I find it helpful too if I'm working in the Finder and I have a large list like this. I like the list view a lot because it will help me see what kind of image here, or file, I mean. So for instance, we have a whole bunch of PNG images, we have JPEG images, we have PDF documents, movies, which are MP4s. So I like those too because if I sort that way, then I could kind of group those together. And maybe like I can group them and then move stuff as a group into a different folder. It just helps me see stuff easier. I really like the ability to sort, so I recommend kind of playing around with that. But yes, if like the question that Susan took before about someone being concerned about deleting things from their downloads folder, I would say go in and right click on your file and then do get info. If you're unsure about what it's telling you, it will tell you, of course, what kind, where it is, when it was created. I don't know if it will tell you who downloaded it or who created it, but that hopefully should give you a little more insight into the file. And it should give you a preview of it as well. So of course for us, we just did this preview of a screenshot, so it's showing that preview, but I think you can also do that for documents. Let me see if it will let me. Okay, so this one is letting me get a preview of this PowerPoint that I had. So yeah, I recommend getting into the file properties if you're unsure about the file itself. And I hope that helps answer your question that you had earlier.
And you can also look up file extensions online too. If you see one that's wonky or weird or you've never seen before, I recommend looking it up online first before opening something. Go and look it up online and see what it says for what kind of file it is.
Yes.
That gives you a little bit more awareness of what it might be.
Yes. I'll add a file extension slide for the next time we do this class because I think it's super useful. I think we had one on the Windows class too, so.
I think we do, but it's more just about knowing that the thing at the end of the file tells you what kind of file it is. But you can also see here that, of course, where you see where it says kind, it's telling you JPEG, but it's also telling you JPEG image. So here the Mac is also making it a little bit easier by saying, image, movie, document. So it's giving you kind of a little bit of a helpful knowing what kind of format it is.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think Apple, it likes to be more user friendly. So if you're new to computers, you're not going to know maybe what a JPEG even is. So it's nice to have that little extra telling you what that file is. All right. Any other questions?
Doesn't look like any other questions so far.
Okay. So let's go ahead and talk about a couple more things about the Finder, and then we're going to dive into some of the best practices for organizing some of the stuff on your computer. So we talked a little bit about the Finder preferences earlier. So if we go into the Finder preferences, of course, there are 4 different options up here at the top. There's general preferences, tags, sidebar, and advanced. So the general preferences would have to do with some of the stuff that you're able to see. So it says show these items on the desktop. So for us, we're seeing our hard disks. If we had any external drives or CDs in there, it would show up on our desktop as well. But of course, I could toggle those on or off. And new Finder window, that means if I open up a new window, what's going to pop up as the thing inside of that window. So for us, it's marked as recent, but of course I could change that if I wanted it to be a different folder. I could have it be my documents folder. I could have it be my desktop. I could have it even be a folder that I choose. So keep that in mind that recent is not necessarily something that has to stay that way. You can change it if you'd like. We talked about our sidebar preferences earlier. We're not going to talk about tags, but I'll put that in the email if anybody wants to know. Advanced settings is useful for maybe if you want to be warned about certain things, such as when you empty the trash. I really recommend thinking about your trash very strongly because once they're gone, they're gone. We're going to talk about a little bit more about the trash in just a second, but it's useful to have that warning on there because you don't want to accidentally delete something that you didn't mean to. Of course, it's also going to have options for when you're doing a search. So for us, it's searching this Mac, but you can have it search a current folder that you're in. It just depends on how you like to do your search. I like to do search this Mac because then I'm not confused as to where I am in my computer, and I can just use it as a wide search. It kind of spreads your net wider and it helps you look for things easier. So one of the important things about your computer too is your storage space. So if you're concerned about the storage space on your computer, there is a way to find out what your storage space is. So how do we do that? So I'm going to close out of my Finder window. To look at your storage space on your computer, you're going to go to your Apple menu. So that's at the top left corner of your computer. And then what you're going to do is you're going to hit About This Mac. So that's the very first option there in that folder or in that menu. And then I have another window here that's going to give me an overview of my computer. It's going to tell me what version I have. But up at the top, I have an option that says Storage. So if I click on Storage, this is going to give me a breakdown of all of the different things that are stored on my computer. So yours may look different, of course, than ours because of what is on your computer. So for us, it's telling us we have 216.59 gigabytes. And it's going to break down. You may have seen it just now switch to these little different slivers. These slivers are breaking down what exactly the storage is going towards. So we have, it looks like 5.78 gigabytes of apps. A lot of people have a lot of music on their computers, so they may have a large portion of their storage devoted to music or pictures. So when you get into your storage, you'll be able to see the breakdown. And of course, if I click Manage Storage, then that's going to let me go into some of the ways I can optimize my storage. So a lot of times people will store things in their cloud. So maybe you have things in your iCloud drive, or maybe you want to move things into your iCloud drive. Again, I cannot tell you what your you're going to do for your computer, since it's your personal preferences and your machine. But that is an option if you want to store things. A lot of people will do it on the cloud. Some people store things on an external drive. It's really up to you what you're doing with your files. But there is a way to see that storage information. And that's really helpful too. When I got my computer last year, I upgraded to a newer MacBook, and I had been transferring stuff from my old laptop, and it said when I went to do my update, it said, you do not have enough storage on your computer. So I thought, oh geez, and then I went into my storage settings and I looked in there to see, you know, what it was taking up, and I had a lot of music on there, and I said, okay, maybe I can take some of my music away. So I ended up deleting a bunch of music that I didn't use anymore. So again, that's just going to help you give an idea of what you have on your computer, so then you can move forward with figuring out how to open up more storage or what have you.
I think that's the biggest conundrum for all of us with tech is there's only a finite amount of storage on each particular device.
Yes, and I think more and more nowadays too is it's going away from the physical storage and it's going towards the cloud.
Yes.
So that's another variable.
A great segue while you take a sip for us to mention that we do have upcoming workshops on cloud and cloud storage. So don't be too concerned at this moment if you don't know what we're talking about when we say iCloud or cloud or Google, Google Drive or things like that. We do have an intro to cloud class. It's actually next week, I believe, or is Pinterest? Well, you'll get to that. I think the cloud storage is next week, and then Pinterest is at the end of the month. But either way, if you see that in our list of workshops, feel free to jump in on that too if you're unfamiliar with cloud, or if you want to learn a little bit more about what cloud providers are.
Yes. All right. So maybe you found out you have a bunch of storage that you're interested in getting rid of. How do we go about deleting those files? So let's talk about that next. So there is something on Mac computers called the trash. On Windows computers, you may have heard it called the recycle bin. Apple calls it the trash. It's the place where you're going to put the things that you want to delete off your computer, right? So for us, our trash is in the bottom right-hand corner here of our dock. Let me move that a little bit. So it looks like an empty trash bin for us right now. If you have things in the trash, it may look like there are some crumpled up pieces of paper inside of that trash bin. But you can move things in there that you're ready to delete. Now, once you move things in there, they're not deleted right away. You actually have to take the extra step to delete them. So let's go ahead and do that in practice. You can see what it looks like. So moving things to the trash is pretty easy, and there are a couple ways to do it. Let's open up a Finder window here. Boop. Okay, so we got our Finder window.
I liked the sound effect there.
Let's move one of these cat pictures into the trash because we already have one. We don't need the copy. How do I do that? So there's a couple ways. As I did before, I can right click on this and I can click move to trash right from that menu. Or what I can do is I can click to select the item, and then I can drag it down to my trash and then let go. So now you see the trash has a little crumpled piece of paper in there. That means there's something in my trash. So once there's something in there, let me close my window. I can click on the trash button, and now I'll see my folder says trash. That's my trash folder here. So my cat picture, the copy that I had, is now in my trash. I can click on empty right from here if I wanted to. Or what I can do is I can right click on my trash and click empty trash. Now keep in mind that things that are in your trash, they're not going away until you empty it. So just think about that. Don't store things in your trash. Trash should be only the things that you're looking forward to deleting. And once you delete those things, there's not really an easy way to get those back unless you talk to a computer professional. So be mindful about what's in your trash and what you're deleting from your trash. Now, of course, once something is in there, you can always move it out of the trash. So I can right click on it and I can click put back. So that will put it back to that folder that I had initially moved it into the trash from. Or I can actually just drag it out of the trash, maybe onto my desktop or into a different folder, and then it will not be in the trash any longer. But let me go ahead and delete it actually, so you can see what that looks like. I'm going to hit empty. And then of course it's going to ask me, are you sure you want to permanently erase the items in the trash? You cannot undo this action. So if I wanted to say yes, I would hit empty trash. If I don't, I would hit cancel. So let's hit empty trash. And now of course my window is closed because there's nothing in there, and my trash is empty. If I open it up again, there's nothing in there. So that is trash. Does anybody have any questions about the Finder or the trash? Otherwise, we're going to talk about best practices for organizing. And I'm happy to demonstrate anything again as well.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we have any questions right now.
All right, so let me switch back to my PowerPoint here because we're just going to cover some of the information. We're going to cover help at the end of the class, but I wanted to cover the some of the tips and stuff for reorganizing or renaming stuff. So let's cover that now. So as we've been saying all throughout the class, there's really a lot of stuff on Apple computers that's going to be up to you. So I wouldn't be able to tell you what your personal preference would be, right? So in that case, there is really no right way to name the files and folders on your computer. But I should say it does pay to use logic. So you might consider thinking of a system that you use consistently, but do especially what works for you, right? So you want to make something that works for you. It is helpful to get tips. Of course, that's why we're here, to give tips. But I can't tell you what to do because I'm not you. But I've written down a couple of things that you may find are useful when you're thinking about renaming things. So for instance, you may want to add a date to something, especially if you're doing maybe something with pictures or with folders. A lot of times when I'm doing dates, I'll make sure to put in the month and year. Sometimes I'll even put in the day if I wanted to get really detailed with something. And of course, there are a lot of different ways to write the date, right? I would say if you pick one way, try to stick to that, because if you have a lot of different ways you're writing something, it might not be consistent, and it may be hard if you're doing a search on your computer. So think about how you're writing your dates if you're writing them. You can use spaces, underscores, periods, or dashes in your file names as well. A lot of people like to use underscores to kind of name certain files that may be consistent over certain years. So maybe you have certain budget files that have the same similar naming convention, but you're adding a year or a month. Some people might use underscores when they're writing that. I like to use spaces a lot because it's easier for me to see, but of course, again, that's just me. You can use whatever you'd like. Some people use periods, some people use dashes. It's really up to you. I also recommend avoiding special characters such as the @ sign, exclamation mark. Those aren't really going to be that helpful in terms of naming things. They're just kind of going to be a distraction, and it's going to be a little harder to find that sort of stuff. I would also say make sure your names are specific and logical, but don't get too detailed. You want to use something that's logical to you, but you don't want to go too overboard with naming, especially if you're writing a big long file name. You may not be able to read it if it's on your desktop or in a folder. It may be hard to read because I think there's only a certain character limit. Again, I can't tell you what to do. It's your file, but it may be not as helpful if it's a super long file name. I like to be more specific than not specific. If it's just a resume and it says resume, that's really not going to do a lot for you, right? you want to get a little more specific than that. Maybe it's a resume that you wrote in December of last year. So it says resume December 2021. That might be helpful rather than just writing resume. Because that's going to help you also search for an item too, especially if you're looking backwards in time. The more specific you are is going to help you in the long run. I also think you may want to avoid abbreviations if possible, especially because you may not always remember what they're going to mean in the future. So you may think, oh yeah, I'm going to remember this forever. But then when you're looking for a file 5 years later, you're like, oh man, what was I even thinking? What does that even mean? So try to avoid those if possible. Again, consider the length. You may not want to go too long with your names. And think about how your items are sorted as well. So when we were sorting items, remember we could sort them alphabetically. If you want things sorted higher on the list, you may consider putting a number in front or a character like a period or a dash. That may help if you're trying to sort things right to the top of your list or to the bottom of your list. So think about that as well. And then, of course, we have a lot of best practices for organizing. So again, just like with naming things, there's not really a right way to organize files, but you're going to want to shoot for the goal of being able to find what you're looking for, even if you're looking for it years after you make it, right? So there's a lot of considerations to keep in mind when it comes to organizing. The first thing I would say is you want things to go in the right place in the first place. So if you're sorting your files, if you're moving stuff around, you're taking the time to move them already, you might as well move them into the place that they belong in the first place. That way you're not going and saying, oh man, this is in the wrong folder, I need to move it over here. Just do it right away. Don't think, oh, this is a placeholder that I'll just kind of put over there and then I'll do it later. If you're doing it already, you might as well just put it where it belongs because you're taking the time anyways, right? As I said before, do not use the trash to store your files or folders because you may accidentally forget it's in there while you're emptying your trash. You wouldn't want pictures or files that were important to be deleted forever. That being said, you may want to consider deleting old files when necessary. So while you're doing your organizing or your sorting, you can move things to the trash as you find necessary. I usually like to schedule time to go in and organize stuff, move stuff into appropriate folders, get stuff out of my downloads. It's going to be really helpful for you because then your stuff is not going to be building up, and then you're going to have to spend like 5 hours organizing, right? But if you schedule your time, then you're going in little by little and you don't have to be like overwhelmed with that. Sometimes whenever you update your computer is maybe a good time to go in and do some organizing. That'll help you kind of get on a schedule with that. Also, using folders logically is really going to help you. So, right, the documents will go into the documents folder. Your photos will go into your photos folder. So stuff like that, make sure it makes sense. That being said, be careful of over nesting your folders. So I think there's a rule of you should probably have like 10 or so files in a folder in order for it to go into its own folder. Because if you're over nesting, it's just like you have like 5 nests and then at the end you've got one file in a folder and you're just like, why did I have to click 5 times to find one file? So it's going to be more harmful if you're just putting one folder or one file into a folder. It might just be more annoying to you than it's worth. And again, like I was saying before, with scheduling your organizing time, think about your downloads folder. You may use your downloads folder pretty often and have a lot of stuff in there. So you may want to organize where those things are going. Maybe you have pictures you've downloaded or documents. Move those into the folders that they need to go into. I remember when I was in grad school, I was downloading just tons and tons of stuff from all the coursework I was doing. And when I finished school, I was finally like, okay, I got to get to my downloads folder. There must have been like 200 or 300 files in there. And it was such a pain to go through. So I recommend doing that pretty often, going through downloads folder. You may not have 300 items in there, but it's helpful to go through that and get those to where they should belong. You should also think about your desktop. So we talked about that briefly before, but your desktop, for me, I like to have it uncluttered. I don't like to have a lot of stuff up there. But think about how you use your desktop. What do you need on your desktop that you access often? Do you like to have folders there? Do you like to have applications there? Think about what your desktop is doing for you. You'll also want to be able to use your search function, right? So this goes back to naming your files. So your search function is going to be super integral to your searching, especially for like maybe you're looking for a resume that you wrote in 2018. If you use your search function, then you're not going to be kind of clawing through a bunch of folders and not knowing where that is. And again, that does go back to naming your folders as well. So your resume logically would probably go in your documents folder, right? And then you may have another nested folder that says resumes, which your resumes would go inside. So think about these things logically. Think about it as you may think about a physical file folder you have in your house, right? So you may have a budget folder, and then you may have separate folders for like 2020, 2021, 2022. So that's nesting that way. So again, it's just your organization style, but think about it logically and think about it in the way that you can recover those items later. So you want to make it as easy as possible on yourself. I've also created something like an inbox that I organize often that lives on my desktop. So sometimes I download a lot of stuff from my computer, or I save things to my desktop pretty often. Those I tend sometimes to put into an inbox folder that I can organize later so that it's not cluttering my desktop, but it's something that I can get to easily. So then I'll go often and get into my inbox and sort that out. Usually I'll do that at the same time that I sort out my downloads folder and get the items to where they need to go. Like I've been saying before, it's good to schedule a time to organize as well. That's going to be the most helpful, I think, to do something consistently. That way you're not overwhelmed later. Also, it's good to stick to the system you came up with, especially when you're naming stuff. So if you're naming things inconsistently and your system doesn't match up from month to month, then you may have a lot of files that are similar, but they're not named similarly. So you may have trouble when you're doing a search. You may have trouble when you're organizing or sorting. So think about your naming and think about your system and stick to it. Of course, you could always change it in the future, but it's best to stick to something consistently. And of course, as we talked about last week, it is really important to back up your information regularly. And usually it's good to have both types of backup, cloud backup and an external drive, like a physical backup, or both. I have both. I have an external hard drive and I have iCloud, but you could have another cloud service such as OneDrive, which is Microsoft's service, or Google Drive. iCloud is Apple's version, of course, and it works easily with Apple products, but of course there are other ones out there as well. Let me see what else. I think that's pretty much all I have. Unless you had anything to contribute, Susan. I know
No,
we talk about this with the Windows class
we
pretty
talk about
often.
this with each other all the time. So yeah, no, I agree with absolutely everything. Personally, I back my stuff up once a month. And that's also when I go into my downloads folder and move things that I need to move or delete things that I no longer need. So I do all of that once a month.
Yeah, I like to make sure I am backing up before I am doing a system update, because I don't know, my dad always told me you better back your computer up before you update it.
Yes.
So I always stuck by that rule,
Yep.
because you
Yep.
never know, something could go wrong with your update, and it may
Yep.
it's happened to me before.
Mhm.
And I'm happy to say that my backup saved me from my computer being
Yep.
not working right.
And you never know when something might fail on your computer too. So having a recent backup saves you a lot of time and effort of having to rebuild stuff if you end up having to get a new machine or you're unable to recover whatever was on the original computer. So
Totally. And there's tons of different information about backups out there online. Once I send out the email that is a follow-up. If you're interested in backup information, I can include it on that email. Okay.
Great.
Any questions?
Anybody have questions?
And of course, I'm happy to demonstrate something again as well.
Sure. No questions at the moment.
All right, so I also included a glossary. So that's some terms that you may encounter when you're dealing with Apple computers. So we talked a little bit about shortcuts, but Apple refers to shortcuts as aliases. So that would be a file that automatically opens the file that it represents. So for instance, maybe you have a program on your desktop that's a shortcut to something. Like for us, we have Zoom on our desktop. It doesn't live on our desktop, it's just a shortcut. We talked about the dock, so that's that part on the bottom of our screen. That's where all of our apps and documents that we frequently use, they live there. Of course, we can change that to either the right or left side if we wanted to, but if you're using a Mac for the first time, yours is probably on the bottom of your screen. We talked about the Finder today, of course. The Finder is the gateway to all your files, apps, and downloads. We didn't talk about Launchpad, but Launchpad is an easy way to find things like apps on your computer. So it will display the apps sort of similar to how it looks on an iPad. And that's a convenient way to open apps. I use that pretty often. We talked about the menu bar, so that's the bar that runs at the very top of your screen, and it contains menus such as the Finder menu, the File menu, the Apple menu, the Go menu, the Help menu. So there you can choose commands such as connecting to Wi-Fi. You can check your statuses like your Bluetooth connections, your time, your date, stuff like that. We also talked about the path bar. So that is a small pane that's located at the bottom of a Finder window, and that shows you the path from the folder you're currently viewing to the top of the file system. So any file you have selected, if you have the path bar enabled, it will show you that path to the file. We also talked about secondary click, which is also known as right click, and you can enable that feature from the System Preferences menu. We talked about how to do that as well. It would be Control and click, or of course you can use the gesture that was explained earlier.
Is it Command click?
No, it's Control
Control
click.
click. Okay, so in this case, it's actually Control click. Okay.
Yes. Command is the keyboard shortcut things. Control is the right clicking.
Okay.
Slightly different than a Windows computer. Takes some getting used to. We talked about the status bar as well. That is near to the path bar at the bottom of the Finder window. If you've got that enabled, it will show how many files are in the folder you're currently viewing and how much storage space is left on the drive that you're currently in. We talked about tags. We didn't go too far into it, but basically tags will provide you with a way to organize your files and folders. You can use colors and words for tags, and then you can search, you can categorize to find things you need quickly. And I'll include some information about tags in the follow-up, but I just thought it was a little too much for today's class. You may have also heard of a zip file. So a zip file is a common file format that's used to compress one or more files together into a single location. So a lot of people use this for reducing file size if they want to email something big or transport something or store something. You can unzip the file and then it will go into its original format. So it's kind of just compresses it, and then once you open it, it uncompresses it, I guess. And then I do have additional resources. So these are links that I have mostly gotten from the Apple support page, but there's one from the GCF Global website. And they're really nice too because they have really good tutorials on how to work with computers, including Apple computers. So I recommend checking that out. But the Apple support page is super, super useful. We use that all the time. I use that when I craft these PowerPoints because their visuals and their step-by-step guides are just super, super easy to use. All right. I think I've covered pretty much everything. Of course, we still have book librarians if you're interested in working one-on-one. We do them pretty often for people that are interested in learning about stuff like our ebooks, or they need help, for instance, on their Apple computers. You can always reach out to us if you fill out that form on our website, or you can always, of course, email us, call us, and we can help you fill out a book librarian form. And also good news too is we'll have these webinars available on our YouTube channel. Of course, we're currently working on the one from last week still, but that will eventually go up on YouTube as well, including this one. We still have the old Apple Computers class on there, I think from last summer. It's slightly different because the operating system was the older one, but I would say it's 98% the same information. And then here's our upcoming classes. So it looks like next week is cloud storage, and then it's intro to Pinterest. And of course, those will still be webinars. You can sign up on our website. And I think, oh, yes, Susan, did you want to talk about the upcoming internet safety class?
Yeah, so we also usually have once a month, we have what we call a specialty tech webinar. Usually these are software pieces like Adobe products or things that might be for folks that are really, feel like they're really comfortable with computers. But sometimes we do have some that are open to anyone. And our one in January is going to be internet safety for adults. I think the last time she came was in July. Internet safety for adults. It's basically a chance for you to learn about what the Attorney General's office does for the state of Illinois. And they'll also talk about some identity theft issues, what to do if you've been the victim of identity theft, and also some tips and tricks. And then also, especially in the time of COVID, some of the scams that they've seen that to help everybody be kind of aware of what they've seen. So I recommend that for anyone. It will not be recorded. So it's another one where it's definitely a good idea to come to that one and attend it live. It'll be Monday, the 24th at 7 p.m. So I do recommend coming to that one live because it will not be recorded. Okay, thanks.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I recommend that one. The person that we have come talk is really good.
Yeah, she's been in it. She was also an education instructor background that she has too. So,
and then of course, if you want to reach out at any time, feel free to email me. I also have a phone here in the office. You can reach out to me using that number. And of course, if you can't reach me, you can always talk to my lovely colleagues, including Susan. So we're all pretty well versed in tech. But of course, if you had a more specific question, I'm kind of the Apple person on staff, but anybody would be able to hopefully answer the questions that you have if you didn't reach me. I think that's the last slide that I have, unless anybody has something they'd like me to show again. I'm happy to do a demonstration, or maybe something that I didn't cover that you had a question about. I'm happy to help field any question you may have.
Yeah, and again, we can open it up to folks that want to ask their questions out loud too. You just have to raise your hand so that I can essentially call on you, and we can unmute you to ask your question out loud if you like.
Yeah, let me get back here to my camera.
And then I did have someone who asked about the Book a Librarian. Yes, absolutely. Book a Librarian would be something where we could go into more in depth on today's topic for you if you'd like. You just fill out that form, that online form, or you can even call us and we can fill it out for you. And then we'll schedule time to meet with you, and we can even, we can print out the handout and go over slides and different steps. You can bring in your MacBook if you want. So that we can sit down with you with your equipment that you're comfortable, want to get more comfortable with. We can do stuff with devices like your smartphone or your tablets. We're happy to help with any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we do that pretty often.
Yeah, and if you have any other topics too, of course, that are tech related. And if we're unable to help you, we will definitely point you toward resources that can help you. So.
Yes, I know that was a lot for today. But, when you're diving into a new operating system, there's a lot to cover.
Yeah. And there's a lot just involved in general with both the theory of organizing files and folders and the actual practice of it. And so there's two different tracks you can take so we want to cover both the theoretical part of it and the how do I actually do it part. So
yeah, I think it's good to get that foundation, and learning all those different buttons and things is really helpful because it's going to help streamline your experience.
Exactly. And even for folks like me, I'm mostly on a Windows environment, but I definitely, of course, gravitate toward learning as much as I can about all the different operating systems and all the different tech out there. And it is a nice skill to have, to be able to see how they're different, but also how they're the same.
Yes, I'd say for the most part, if you're a Windows user, there is going to be a little bit of a learning curve, but they try to keep it sort of similar in terms of, like, if you're going to hit a red X, you're going to close a window. You know what I mean?
So we did have a question about drive, and I'm not sure if it was about, there's a couple of different things that include drive. Your computer itself is a drive. Like this PC or this Mac would be a drive. There's also, I think, Rebecca, I'm not sure where it actually came up in the conversation, but I'm guessing with cloud, possibly.
Maybe so Google Drive.
And because Google Drive and OneDrive maybe. Those are cloud sources. So it may have been at that point that we were talking about drives in that way, which would be things that if you're going to use the cloud, i.e. basically off-site storage for your devices, your files and your folders and everything. OneDrive is Microsoft's product. You have iCloud, or iCloud Drive actually, is Apple's product. And then you also have like Dropbox, and there's a couple others, but some of them do actually have the word drive in their name.
Yes, drive is a pretty common word for, like, if you've heard of an external drive, or it's just that portion of your computer that's going to hold all of your data, basically.
Yeah. So,
and a cloud drive would be the same, just sort of internet.
Yes. So you may have heard of hard drive, right? Your hard drive is the drive that stores everything that's actually in your computer. So usually the hard drive is actually a physical, usually actually it's a disk that spins, that saves everything on your computer. And then, like Rebecca said, external hard drives are something that a lot of people use to back up their files or folders. And it's a physical drive that you plug into the computer to move things. So, and then if it's cloud, that means you're taking whatever you have on your particular computer, and you're basically sending it over the internet to your cloud provider, like OneDrive or iCloud Drive, or what was the other one?
Google Drive?
Google Drive. Yeah, Google Drive. It also has drive in the title. And then
there's another one called iDrive.
There's a lot of them out there. And they're kind of capitalizing on the term drive as related to your hard drive on your actual computer, to kind of signify storage.
Yes.
So hopefully that helps.
Maybe
kind of
I'll
answer the question.
That as one of my terms. Let me write that down.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you don't think about it, drive to me is like I'm driving a car.
Yes, yes.
You wouldn't necessarily think that it means, computer storage.
Yeah.
So
English is weird that way.
And technology is weird that we have a whole other vocabulary system with it.
Yeah, it really is its whole language, really.
Yes, that's why we include those glossaries and things usually, and try to help. Yeah, it's like its own language. So,
any other questions for us or demonstrations? I'm happy to do something again.
Yes. And we're happy to do that in person too, if you want to schedule a book a librarian, where you get the one-on-one individual attention from a staff member. If it's specifically about Mac, it'll probably be myself or Rebecca, most likely.
And I think too, it does help if you are at home and practicing, like Susan, you were saying before, you just grab maybe a couple
Mhm.
files off the internet to practice with, moving around, stuff that you're not concerned
Yeah.
about losing.
Mhm.
And that way you can practice moving stuff
Yeah.
into folders or creating new folders.
Or practice copying a file that you already have and then play with that copy and, move it to the
Hmm.
trash and delete it, empty your trash, make another
Hmm.
copy of it and move it to a different folder, all that kind of stuff. It's good to practice all that. And that might actually help you come up with whatever system you want to use too for how you want to name things in the future.
Yep.
So, yeah. All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I'm going to say thank you everyone for your kind comments in the chat there too. And we will hopefully have something for you. We'll have a really chock full email this time. I've
Oh
written
yeah.
down quite a few things for us to include for follow-up questions too, with more explanation. So, all
Cool.
right. Well, I want to say thank you everyone to coming. Thank you, Rebecca, for a fabulous lesson in
You're welcome.
Macs and file storage and organization. That was really fun. I always enjoy learning new things, and I learned something new today. So
Oh,
I always
good.
like that. Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you for coming
Thank
today.
you.
Hopefully, we'll see you next week.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.